This is the Porsche 911 GT3 RS Manthey kit, and I'm going to try and review it at this year's Goodwood Festival of Speed. We haven't got much time and it's very hot, so let's get straight into it. The Manthey kit is a £100,000 optional add-on to a regular 911 GT3 RS, a car that, as we know, is a little on the soft side and famously short of weapons-grade aerotech. Or not. The headlines are a big increase in downforce. We're talking 1,000 kilograms at 177 miles an hour. That's up from 860 kilograms in the regular GT3 RS. Manthey has achieved this by building on an already standout aero package. And what really helped them was the fact that there's no longer any boot in the front, so they could unlock so much more aerodynamic potential, which in turn meant there was the possibility of even more downforce on the rear. Starting at the front, there's a new, larger splitter, and it makes so much downforce that they've actually had to reinforce it with these carbon fiber rods. And apparently, you can put 100 kilograms of weight onto the splitter and it won't break, although I'm not going to try that right now. Come around the side, there's additional fins here to aid the downforce, but what's really important is the vortex generator, which is created by the new front splitter, and that helps disrupt all that turbulent air that's going around the wheel, and that's never good for aerodynamics. So that's a really important element that they're very proud of. And then come down the side of the car, the carbon cap on the rear wheel, that does an even better job at disrupting that airflow. So what you've got is essentially an extra couple of points of downforce that's created just by having this. They would like to make it larger, but obviously there's cooling issues with that. Also on the roof, you'll see 6 extra little strakes here. Porsche said they would have liked to have done that on the regular GT3 RS, but they couldn't because of manufacturing issues. So Manthey went, you know what, we'll do it, and we'll create a system where they're diverting the hot air away from the engine intakes, which is obviously very beneficial. The massive fin, look at that, it's inspired by the Le Mans 963 car, and it creates more stability at high speeds. And then how can you miss the ginormous spoiler? It's even bigger than before. This is down to Manthey. The active element is also down to Manthey, and it looks just majestic. The result of these upgrades is, of course, a 20% increase in downforce, yet there's no drag penalty to go along with it. Manthey also reckons there's a forward shift in aero balance by about 2%, which is crucial for adding confidence in the front end on a rear-engine car. So here's something you might not know. Goodwood Festival of Speed involves a lot of queuing. Even if you're driving a car up the hill, there's lots of very expensive traffic jams and lots of waiting around. But it does give me an opportunity to tell you all about the suspension on the Manthey kit, because they've completely changed it. Now, usually Manthey goes with a passive suspension setup, but this time they've got a semi-active two-way damper, which means that they can keep the configurability of the GT3 RS, and you can change that, the bump and the rebound down here on the switches, which is obviously a massive selling point of the car. So that was super crucial. And also the spring rates are up 30% and 15% front and rear respectively. As part of the active element of the dampers, there's also a new ECU, and what that does is it takes the vertical acceleration of each individual wheel and also the chassis acceleration, and it combines that with lots of other parameters around the car, such as the G-forces, the throttle position, the brake position, steering, gear, all that sort of thing. And then at a rate of up to 1,000 times a second, it makes individual little adjustments to each damper for the road conditions, which is very impressive and complex. Okay, so maybe I was getting a little carried away. The dampers actually communicate with the ECU 1,000 times a second, but the adjustments only take place 50 times a second. That said, another benefit of the new suspension is that Manthey has been able to make its own damper presets, and it's superior to the stock car in that normal, sport and track drive modes now have their own setting, whereas before they had to share 2 between 3. That means that normal mode is now the comfiest, rather than track with bump and rebound dialed back, which of course is a lot more logical. Now, although the Goodwood hill climb isn't a racetrack, it is fairly flat, so I'm going to put the drive mode into track, and I'm going to leave the bump and rebound alone, so it's 0 for everything. Apparently, on the Nürburgring, the pros will add a couple of points to the rebound at the rear, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it at 0. There's a nice baseline. Something else I've noticed as I put my helmet on is there's no view out the back at all. They've replaced the already lightweight rear screen with a piece of carbon fibre, which apparently is 25% lighter, but it's also there to support the massive shark fin. But in terms of saving weight, they surely could have got rid of the rear view mirror, which is now rendered absolutely useless, but it's still there. Interesting one. Right, so here we go, lining up at the start, drive up to the man, pay attention to him, foot on brake, and when he lifts his arm we can activate the launch control and off we go. That wasn't quite 3.2 to 62 miles an hour, but it was fairly close, I think. Right, the responses from the front end. Wow, oh my word, hello. This is moving. It is so, it's just like there's no inertia at all. Coming into Moulcombe, I'm going to brake early because I'm a wimp, and this is one of those corners where you don't want to take any chances. Back on the power, so much traction at the rear end. It feels like there's a really good increase in mechanical grip. Third gear through the flint wall. Oh, I'll be a bit braver. Come on, there we go. Bit of confidence in the rear end now. Blind corner, nice. Third gear. Little lift around another blind corner. Back on the power. Fourth gear, that's 100 mile an hour. And probably only got the aero working right at the end there. But I know it was only a short run, but just the immediacy of the front end and that total, the best way to describe it is a lack of inertia, where the car feels far lighter than it is and far more responsive than a hunk of metal and carbon and plastic and Alcantara race tex, whatever it's called, could ever be. It's such a good sensation. That was awesome. I'd like longer in it, and I'd like to properly feel the aero. Well, as it happens, I did get a chance to properly try out the aerodynamics a couple of weeks later, and it wasn't at Goodwood or Brands Hatch or anywhere else in the UK. Instead, it was at Monza, the Temple of Speed. Now, I didn't have a camera crew with me on this trip, so what you're seeing here is just onboard footage, but hopefully it gives you a good idea of what this car is like to drive once you get the downforce fully switched on. I had a regular 911 GT3 RS running in front, which was a great way of showcasing the difference, but also it meant I did have to hold back a bit. Starting in the slow corners, the mechanical grip and traction from the Manthey was superior. It hooked up more sweetly at the rear end and just had more conviction at the front. However, it must be said that while both cars were running in track mode with everything equal, the Manthey was on Michelin Cup 2Rs, while the GT3 RS was on Pilot Sport Cup 2s. So there is a significant difference there, probably about half the 4-second lap time improvement around Monza. However, it's absolutely clear through Curva Grande, for example, that the Manthey's superior aero helps you carry a tighter line and removes the need to let the car run out to the left. Also, coming over some of the curbs, the KW dampers in the Manthey allow more composure, and thanks to the dual valving versus the single valve on the standard car, are able to respond better to what's going on underneath the wheel. So, while the advantage from the Cup 2R tyres is obvious, it's also the additional approachability rather than the extra outright pace that stands out about the Manthey kit. The regular GT3 RS felt very capable, but a little bit nervous in places, whereas the Manthey gave the feeling of utter stability and poise. If you want to get the most out of your 911 GT3 RS, both on road and on track, and you have the extra £100,000 lying around, I reckon it is worth the upgrade. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below.